I knew something had changed the moment I walked into the hallway that morning. As I reached the kitchen, I saw my fiance, Ethan Carter, quietly stepping out of Lily Morgan's guest room. We locked eyes for a second before he awkwardly cleared his throat. "She wasn't feeling well last night," he said, trying to sound calm. "Her stomach was hurting, and she didn't want to be alone." I simply nodded and walked past him without saying a word. He followed me into the kitchen, obviously uncomfortable. "Emily, don't be distant with her when she wakes up. Lily is very emotional. She'll blame herself if she thinks you're upset." I almost laughed. Ever since Lily had returned from studying abroad a few weeks earlier, our peaceful life had disappeared. Every conversation between Ethan and me somehow became about protecting her feelings. Mine no longer mattered. Instead of arguing, I unlocked my phone and placed it in front of him. "You don't have to worry," I said quietly. "As long as you're with her, she'll never feel lonely." His eyes fell on the photo displayed on the screen. Just after midnight, Lily had uploaded a smiling selfie with the caption, "My favorite person stayed beside me all night, warming my stomach until the pain disappeared." Poor Ethan looks completely exhausted. In the picture, Ethan was asleep beside her, one hand resting gently across her lower abdomen. He stared at the screen, unable to explain himself. This time, I didn't ask for an explanation. I no longer needed one. Only hours earlier I had been lying in a hospital bed after losing the baby I hadn't even had the chance to tell him about. That morning I had started bleeding heavily while we were driving together. When Ethan noticed the blood on the passenger seat, his expression twisted with annoyance instead of concern. "Couldn't you be more careful?" he had snapped. "Why does this always happen at the worst time?" Before I could explain anything, he pulled the car over, opened my door, and told me to find my own way home. Rain poured down as he drove away, leaving me standing alone beside the road. By the time I reached the hospital in a taxi, the doctors could no longer save my pregnancy. They spoke gently, but every word felt like another knife cutting through me. If I had arrived earlier, there might have been hope. When I returned home that evening, pale and exhausted, Ethan didn't ask where I had been. Instead, he casually tossed a bundle of laundry onto the bed. "Lily stained these," he said. "Can you wash them?" Later I saw another one of her posts online. This time she had taken a picture of Ethan making fresh ginger tea in our kitchen. The caption read, "When I don't feel well, Ethan worries even more than I do." That was the exact moment something inside me finally broke. I called my manager before I could change my mind. "About the position in London," I said. "If it's still available, I'll take it." There was a long silence before he answered. "Emily, are you certain? It's a 3-year assignment." I looked around the house that no longer felt like mine. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm certain." After ending the call, I walked toward our bedroom. The sight waiting for me there made me stop in the doorway. Lily was lying comfortably across my side of the bed, smiling as if she belonged there. "Your mattress is so comfortable," she said sweetly. "It really helps my cramps. You don't mind, do you?" Ethan entered behind me and didn't even notice my expression. "Let her stay here tonight," he said naturally. "You can sleep in the guest room." His words no longer hurt the way they once would have. Without arguing, I picked up my laptop from the desk and quietly left the room. Behind me I heard Lily laughing. "The tea you made is delicious." Ethan answered in the gentle voice he used only with her. "I'll make you another cup if you want." I spent the evening alone in the study. An email from work arrived a few minutes later containing the official transfer documents for London. I signed every page immediately. Hours passed. When Ethan discovered that his usual evening bath hadn't been prepared, he finally remembered I existed. He walked toward the study, but before he reached the door Lily called his name. He smiled, turned around without hesitation, and disappeared into her room again. He never came back that night. The next morning he acted as though nothing unusual had happened. Don't overthink Lily's social media posts, he said while watching me prepare breakfast by myself. She's still immature. I simply nodded. Seeing that I wasn't arguing, he seemed relieved. You've always liked my seafood porridge, he offered. I'll cook it for you today. I looked at him in silence. During the 8 years we had been together, he had never once cooked a meal because I wanted it. Every dish he prepared had always been for Lily. Before I could answer, she came running into the kitchen barefoot, wrapped in one of his oversized sweaters. She slipped her arm through his and smiled brightly. Ethan, I suddenly want lobster sandwiches from that little restaurant near the coast. I remembered asking him to take me there months earlier. Back then he had refused immediately because the drive was too long. Now he smiled warmly and gently tapped her forehead. Anything for you, he said. Within minutes they had left together, forgetting I was still standing in the kitchen. I finished breakfast alone, washed the dishes, then picked up my phone and quietly canceled the engagement photo session we had planned for the following month. The silence inside the house felt heavier after they left. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't waiting for Ethan to come home because I missed him. I was waiting to see whether I still mattered to him at all. As I put my phone down after canceling the engagement photos, a sharp pain spread through my lower abdomen. My knees gave out and I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, barely able to breathe. Trembling, I reached for my phone and called Ethan. The ringing seemed endless before he finally answered. Emily, what is it now? He said impatiently. I could hear Lily laughing somewhere in the background. Ethan. I don't feel well. I whispered, struggling to stay conscious. Before I could finish, he interrupted me. Can't you hear we're ordering food? Lily hasn't eaten all day. If it's not an emergency, send me a message. The call ended before I could say another word. I stared at the dark screen while tears blurred my vision. A few minutes later everything around me faded into darkness. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital room. A nurse explained that a neighbor had found me unconscious and called an ambulance. The doctor confirmed what I already feared. The miscarriage was complete. There was nothing anyone could do anymore except tell me to rest. That evening my phone rang again. It was Ethan. Why aren't you home? He asked casually. I closed my eyes. I'm still working, I lied. He accepted the answer without hesitation. Good. Lily's staying with us for a while. Try not to come back too late tonight. She needs proper sleep. He didn't ask whether I had eaten. He didn't ask how I was feeling. His only concern was that I might disturb her. After hanging up, I stared out the hospital window until sunrise. The next morning I was discharged. On my way home I stopped at a pharmacy to collect medication. As I stepped outside, I froze. Ethan was standing near the entrance with Lily leaning against him dramatically, as though she could barely remain on her feet. The moment he noticed me, his expression became strangely guarded. Emily? Are you seeing a doctor too? He asked. His tone almost sounded suspicious, as though he believed I had followed them. I met his eyes calmly. Yes. I wasn't feeling well. For a brief second guilt flashed across his face, perhaps reminding him of the day he left me on the roadside. Before he could say anything else, Lily tightened her grip around his arm and sighed softly. Emily came here all by herself. She must not be that sick. Then she looked up at him with watery eyes. I'm hopeless, aren't I? Whenever I'm in pain, you always have to take care of me. His expression softened instantly. Stop saying that. I'll always be here for you. They started walking away together before Ethan suddenly looked back at me. Come with us. I'll drive you home. It sounded less like kindness and more like obligation. It's all right, I replied. I'm going back to the office first. Without asking what I wanted, he opened the rear door of the car. Get in. I quietly obeyed, too exhausted to argue. Lily settled comfortably into the front passenger seat as though it had always belonged to her. She smiled at me through the mirror. Ethan has hardly gone to work lately because he's been taking care of me. He's free almost every day now. I looked at the back of his head and remembered every anniversary he had missed because of work, every birthday dinner he had cancelled, every fever I had endured alone because he said he couldn't leave the office. Somehow, when it came to Lily, none of those excuses existed anymore. We hadn't even driven 10 minutes before Lily gasped dramatically. "Oh no. I think I stained your seat." Ethan glanced down at the faint mark without the slightest irritation. "Don't worry," he said gently. "We'll have it cleaned." Then, almost instinctively, he looked at me in the rearview mirror. Perhaps he remembered how he had reacted when he believed my blood had stained the same seat. I didn't say a single word. There was nothing left worth saying. When we arrived at my office building, my department manager happened to be walking toward the entrance. He looked surprised to see me. "Emily," he called. "Have you made your final decision about London? Once everything is approved, it can't be undone. I thought your wedding was next month." Before I could answer, Ethan lowered his window. "Actually," he interrupted, "we're postponing the wedding. Lily wants to travel next month, so Emily and I can just move everything back a few weeks." He spoke as though the decision belonged entirely to him. "That's fine," I answered quietly. Ethan stared at me in disbelief. Normally I would have argued. Normally I would have begged him to think about us instead of her. But that version of me no longer existed. Lily leaned closer to him and laughed. "Why postpone it? We can all travel together. It'll be so much more fun." Ethan smiled immediately. "That's a great idea." Then he looked at me. "We'll just book separate rooms." I simply nodded. He didn't know there would never be a honeymoon. There would never be a wedding either. After they drove away, my manager remained beside me in silence before speaking softly. "If you want, I can speed up the transfer. You could be in London tomorrow night." I looked toward the disappearing car one final time. "Please do it," I answered. "The sooner I leave, the better." He studied my face for a long moment before quietly nodding. "I'll take care of everything." For the rest of the afternoon, I buried myself in paperwork. I signed the transfer agreement, cancelled our honeymoon reservation, cancelled the florist, the wedding venue, the catering appointment, the dress fitting, and every remaining reservation connected to a future that no longer existed. Every confirmation email felt like another chain breaking. Before leaving the office, I also requested copies of my complete medical records, including the doctor's report confirming my pregnancy loss and the emergency call log from the day I collapsed. Finally, I filled out one last document. Where Ethan's name had appeared for years under emergency contact, I carefully crossed it out and replaced it with my manager's information. My hand trembled as I signed the form. Not because I still loved Ethan, but because I finally accepted the truth. The one person I had trusted with my life had chosen someone else's comfort over mine when I needed him most. That evening, something unusual happened. Ethan came to pick me up from work himself. As soon as I got into the car, he handed me a stainless steel thermos. "I made ginger tea for you," he said, almost awkwardly. Before I could respond, his phone lit up with a new message. The preview appeared on the screen before he could hide it. It was from Lily. "You made so much tea. Are you trying to spoil me?" My eyes moved from the message to the thermos in my hands. It wasn't made for me at all. I quietly placed it in the cup holder without taking a sip. Ethan noticed but pretended nothing had happened. After a few minutes he glanced at the folder resting on my lap. "Those documents, are they about the London office?" he asked. "Just work," I answered calmly. "My manager asked me to review them." He seemed relieved. After another long silence, he suddenly said, "Take tomorrow off. I'll take you to the movies." Months earlier I had begged him to watch that exact film with me. He had refused because he was too busy. A week ago he had gone to see it with Lily instead. No, I replied quietly. I have plans. My answer irritated him immediately. Emily, what is wrong with you lately? Lily stays with us for a few days and suddenly everything becomes a problem. I looked out the window. Nothing is wrong. Don't lie to me. His voice became colder. With this attitude, how are we supposed to build a family? Lily would feel uncomfortable living with us if you keep acting like this. Then he said the words that erased the final piece of hope I had been holding on to. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. This is my house. If I decide Lily stays there for a few days, that's my decision. Even if she decided to live with us permanently, you would have no right to complain. I stared at my reflection in the window. Strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel hurt. There was only silence inside me. You're right, I answered softly. I don't have the right anymore. Ethan frowned as though he had expected another argument. Instead, I opened the door as soon as the car stopped outside my office building. Where are you going? He asked sharply. I stepped onto the sidewalk and adjusted my coat. Take Lily somewhere nice, I said. She'll probably be hungry again. For the first time all day, he looked uncertain. He called my name as I walked toward the entrance, but I never turned around. Inside the lobby my manager was still waiting. The moment he saw my face, he understood my decision without asking. Are you absolutely sure? He asked one last time. Once I send the paperwork tonight, you could be flying to London tomorrow evening. Please send it, I replied. I don't want to stay here any longer. He nodded quietly. I'll arrange everything. The rest of the afternoon disappeared in a blur of signatures and emails. I finalized every remaining document connected to my transfer. I canceled the honeymoon reservation, informed the wedding venue that the ceremony would never happen, canceled the photographer, florist, catering company, and even the cake tasting Ethan had postponed twice because Lily suddenly needed his attention. One by one, every reminder of our future disappeared from my calendar. Before leaving the office, I requested complete copies of my hospital records. They included the doctor's diagnosis, the emergency admission, and the notes explaining that earlier treatment might have saved the pregnancy. I also printed the phone records showing the exact time I had called Ethan before losing consciousness. Then I removed his name from every medical document where he was listed as my emergency contact. That single signature hurt more than canceling the wedding. For 8 years I had believed he would always be the first person someone would call if my life depended on it. The truth was, someone had called him. He had chosen someone else instead. Before I left, my manager handed me my flight itinerary. Departure, tomorrow evening. Destination, London. Contract length, 3 years. Do you need someone to drive you to the airport? He asked. I smiled faintly. Thank you. I would appreciate that. When I returned home that night, Lily was sitting comfortably in the living room wearing one of Ethan's oversized shirts. She was drinking tea from my favorite mug as though everything inside the house already belonged to her. She looked up and smiled innocently. You're back. Ethan went out to buy lobster sandwiches again. I didn't finish mine earlier. I hope you enjoy them, I answered before walking upstairs. She followed me with curious eyes. In the bedroom, I opened my closet and pulled out my largest suitcase. This time I packed only what truly belonged to me, my clothes, work files, passport, laptop, a few photographs from before Lily came back, and several books that had comforted me during difficult years. Everything Ethan had given me stayed behind. The expensive jewelry. The designer handbags. The matching robes he once said made us look like a happy couple. They no longer meant anything. Lily appeared in the doorway, watching me fold another sweater into the suitcase. Are you trying to make Ethan jealous? She asked with a smile. No. Then why are you packing? I zipped one compartment before answering. Because I'm leaving. She laughed confidently. He won't let you go. I finally looked directly at her. Then you can help him pack too. You already seem very comfortable living my life. For a moment the sweetness disappeared from her face. You really think he'll chase after you? She asked quietly. I smiled for what felt like the first genuine time in weeks. You still believe this is a competition? Without another word, I carried my suitcase into the study. On the desk I carefully placed my engagement ring, the house keys, copies of the cancelled wedding reservations, the transfer approval, and the hospital records. On top of everything, I left one handwritten note. It contained only a single sentence. You told me I had no right to object. So I stopped objecting. Goodbye. I didn't mention our baby. I didn't write about the hospital or the rain. The documents would tell him everything when he finally decided to read them. I was too exhausted to explain what he had never cared enough to ask. The following evening my manager drove me to the airport. During the entire trip my phone remained on the passenger seat, lighting up again and again with Ethan's calls. The first message arrived while we were leaving the city. Where are you? Lily said you packed a suitcase. Are you seriously trying to punish me? 10 minutes later another message appeared. Come home before I lose my patience. I turned the phone over so I wouldn't have to see his name anymore. At the terminal my manager helped me unload my luggage. If you ever need anything in London, don't hesitate to call, he said sincerely. I thanked him and walked toward security. Just before entering the checkpoint, my hand instinctively rested on my stomach. There was nothing left to protect anymore. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered words no one else could hear. I'm sorry, my little one. I couldn't save you, but I promise I'll save myself. Then I boarded the plane. My phone started ringing once more just before takeoff. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. This time I switched the device off completely. By the time he returned home that evening, I was already somewhere above the clouds, leaving everything behind. Later I learned what happened after my departure. Ethan walked into the house expecting another argument. Instead, he found silence. My coat was gone. My shoes had disappeared from the hallway. My side of the closet stood nearly empty. He searched every room before finally entering the study. There, on the desk, lay my engagement ring, the house keys, my note, and the stack of hospital documents. At first he dismissed everything as another attempt to make him feel guilty. Then he picked up the medical report. As he read each page, the color slowly drained from his face. Threatened miscarriage. Delayed treatment. Pregnancy loss. Emergency admission. Then the final document, the phone log showing I had called him while collapsing at home. He remembered answering. He remembered hanging up because Lily wanted food. For the first time since I had known him, he had no excuse. That same night he called my manager repeatedly until the call was finally answered. Where is Emily? He demanded. She no longer works here, my manager replied calmly. She accepted the London assignment. Ethan fell silent. When did she leave? Tonight. Tell me which flight. I'm afraid I can't share personal information. His voice broke. I'm her fiance. My manager answered without hesitation. Not according to her emergency contact records. Only then did Ethan realize I had truly left. The wedding hadn't been postponed. There would never be one. Lily tried comforting him after finding him surrounded by the documents. She insisted she had never intended for anything so terrible to happen. She claimed she hadn't known I was pregnant. Ethan looked at her differently for the first time. She called me, he whispered. She needed me, and I ignored her. Lily tried to defend herself. You were busy taking care of me. Besides, Emily always overreacted. Something inside him finally shattered. Before he could respond, Lily's phone lit up with a message from one of her friends. Did she finally leave? You won. Send screenshots. Ethan quietly took the phone from her hands. What he found was worse than anything he had imagined. There were conversations filled with laughing emojis, jokes about sleeping in my bed, captions prepared for social media before they were even posted, and messages celebrating every time Ethan chose her over me. One message read, "If Emily really mattered, he would have picked her instead of me by now." He read that sentence again and again until his hands began shaking. When Lily reached for him, he stepped backward. It was the first time he had ever refused her. The following morning, Ethan's parents arrived after hearing his trembling voice over the phone. His mother read every hospital document without speaking. When she finished, she looked directly at her son. "You left her bleeding on the roadside?" she asked. Ethan lowered his head. "I thought." "You thought wrong." Her voice remained calm, making every word hurt even more. "You didn't need to know she was carrying your child to treat her with basic humanity." Then she slapped him across the face. He never tried to defend himself. Lily rushed into the room crying, hoping someone would comfort her as always. Instead, Ethan's mother looked at her with disappointment. "Don't ever call me family again." Within days, the wedding cancellation became public. Ethan's relatives withdrew their support. Lily lost the job she had received through his family's company. The screenshots from her private conversations somehow found their way onto social media, exposing every cruel joke she had made while pretending to be innocent. Public sympathy vanished almost overnight. Meanwhile, my own life in London was far from easy, but for the first time in years it was peaceful. I rented a small apartment overlooking a quiet street. The rooms were simple, and the nights often felt lonely, yet no one expected me to compete for affection anymore. At work, I was valued for my abilities instead of my relationship status. Slowly, I rebuilt the confidence I had lost. There were difficult days when memories returned without warning, especially whenever it rained. But little by little, those memories stopped controlling my future. Nearly 3 years passed before I returned home as the director of our London division. During a corporate reception held in the same building where I had once asked for my transfer, I saw Ethan again. He looked older than his age, thinner, and far less certain of himself. Lily wasn't beside him anymore. Neither was anyone else. After the event, he approached me quietly. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." I looked at him calmly. "I know." Tears gathered in his eyes. "If I had known about the baby." I stopped him before he could finish. "You didn't need to know I was pregnant to treat me with kindness." He lowered his head, unable to deny it. "I think about that day every single day." "That's something you'll have to live with," I answered gently. He looked at me with the same regret I had once wished to see, but now it no longer mattered. The woman who had waited for him had disappeared years ago in a hospital room. Before leaving the reception, I noticed one of my colleagues waiting patiently near the entrance. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions. He simply smiled when I walked toward him. Together we stepped outside into the evening air. For the first time in a very long time, the rain no longer reminded me of abandonment. It was only rain. I realized then that healing isn't about making someone else suffer as deeply as they made you suffer. Real healing begins the moment you choose yourself, close the door behind you, and never look back.